I'm going to read one of the chapters of Arnett Tanner Wants to Die, the hype for which has died down quite a bit lately because either been editing it or ignoring it for other work and not really talking about it a whole lot. For those of you that don't remember, the premise is that death has been abolished through medical and technological means. People can routinely download their consciousnesses into memory sticks, and once they die, can have those re-uploaded into a new body. And the whole point of the book is that sort of immortality might not necessarily be a good thing. And Arnett Tanner, the title character, recognized that, and he wants out. He wants to die, as it clearly states. And I've been editing it again, just trying to really clean up a lot of the typos and stuff and get it to a point where I can publish it online. But I have a few very interesting premises about where to take this, and they're kind of ingrained in the story already, but I don't know if they're too subtle, and I might make them more overt. But anyway, the whole point of this really is just to read this chapter and hopefully gather some interest for this story, and get people eagerly awaiting it again. Hopefully I don't stumble over this too bad. But it's chapter 18. The title is Second Session, and Tanner is going to his second session of group therapy, which in this world is an outdated method of therapy. Tanner woke Tuesday morning, the events of the weekend's meeting with the Reapers still fresh in his mind. He laid in bed for a moment before it dawned on him that it was also the morning of his second session. A quick glance at the clock allayed his fears of oversleeping. He still had over an hour left. He dragged himself to a standing position and stumbled over to the shower. 110, he mumbled, stepping in. Soap. The water blinked on, instantly reaching the desired temperature, and foamed over his body. He stood there lazily for a second, attempting to wake and organize his thoughts regarding his secret society. After 15 minutes, he'd come to no further conclusion than he had that night, or in the days following. Sighing, he turned off the water. Perhaps the therapy session would jar him back into his normal, cold, indecisive state of mind. After having an uninspiring bowl of cereal for breakfast, Tanner had the coffee maker fill a thermos for him, and he headed out the door. The water was just warm and inviting enough for him to not want to be in it as he walked briskly down the street, singularly focused on his destination. When he was about halfway there, a familiar voice startled him. "Hello, Governor," Havoc called in an obnoxiously high-pitched and not terribly attractive Cockney accent. She grinned, her large eyes growing wider as she approached him. "Ready for another enthralling session?" "Is anyone ever?" Tanner replied gruffly, trying to force some semblance of tolerance into his tone and posture. There was a good chance he would need Havoc and her connections in the near future. Though she was a handful, he was slowly finding that putting up with her grew less difficult. At the very least, she was a comedy hour all by herself. "Fair point," she replied, suddenly seeming uninterested. The light changed and they crossed the street, only a block away from the building. Havoc mercifully stayed silent in the few short minutes it took them to arrive. They'd beaten Ackerman and most of the other attendees there and took two empty seats together at the back of the room. Havoc pretended to adjust hers, and in doing so, slid herself closer to Tanner. He rolled his eyes and pretended to care, but said nothing. People slowly began to fill the room, but none of them even approached or acknowledged the stormy-looking pair of Havoc and Tanner in the back. Tanner had made enough of an impression during the first meeting for everyone to be wary, and Havoc's reputation was well known. Even Stephen simply hurried to his seat, though Tanner supposed he couldn't afford to be seen making nice with either of them. Ackerman came in with the same bluster as before, seemingly causing everything in the room to swirl. His eyebrows sat perched high on his bald head in excited anticipation. "Hello again," he said happily. "Glad to see we didn't lose anyone over the weekend." "I'm feeling kind of lazy, so let's get things rolling with a very simple question. Why did you kill yourself?" "We'll go clockwise, starting..." Ackerman walked into the center of the room, held a hand over his eyes. and spun in circles, prompting giggles from a few of the more vacant attendees. Finally, his long, bony finger came to rest opposite his desk. Havoc will be first, Tanner second. Thanks a lot, old man, Havoc blurted, rolling her eyes. You might not want to use an insult that applies to every male member here, Ackerman countered with a bright smile. Do I give a shit about any of them? Havoc replied immediately, then turned to face Tanner. Her eyes went wide as though she'd just remembered he was in the room. Sorry, she whispered, and the look on her face actually seemed somewhat sincere. Tanner laughed. Don't apologize for honesty, he said. Havoc smiled at him. She sighed heavily again. It's not like I haven't said it before. My other self was ugly, dumpy, and crazy. Really, you should have seen her, she said, leaning towards the somewhat rotund and very offended woman on her right. It was pathetic. So I took a bottle, busted it, and set out to right those wrongs. Goddamn arteries are hard to find. Must have been a glorious scene to clean up. Tanner sat back in his chair, saying nothing, showing nothing, a reaction not shared by many of the now uncomfortable attendees. Havoc continued. Now I'm not ugly, and not dumpy, and not... not those first two, she said with a laugh. So you upgraded, Ackerman said, his smile fading into a tight-lipped look that couldn't quite be called a scowl. Havoc put a hand behind her head and pretended to tease her hair. Thanks for noticing. Do you like it? She asked with a lecherous grin. Ackerman ignored her flirts and moved onwards. The girl was right about one thing. He had cheated in selecting someone to speak. If Tanner was ever going to take even the first step towards recovery, distancing himself from the rather unique Miss Bentley would be a good way to start. He hoped that bringing the girl's myriad issues and unabashed acceptance, even sometimes pride in them, would be a good start in turning Tanner off to her presence. In reality, it had the opposite effect. Tanner found himself beside a human being that genuinely interested him. He'd gotten used to being around two types of people. Those that moved through their various lives without so much as an independent thought. They were simply happy to continue in their existence in the same long, straight, never-ending line. And those that had been around so long, become so accustomed to their small slice of the world that they were almost caricatures of themselves, like the stale characters in a sitcom that had run 3 seasons too long. Havoc was an enigma, closer to the latter than the former. The difference was that she held the pen. She was both a willing and an unwilling caricature, a contradiction. Honest and open about the things around her, but at the same time so shrouded. Tanner couldn't help but be intrigued by her. He couldn't help but be compelled to simply observe her, like an impending crash, waiting to see what would happen. There was some pity in his feelings toward her, pity that was different than how he felt about those people who were sadly not intelligent enough to truly see how deathlessness had either perverted or neutered their lives. Those that thought nothing was wrong with their monotonous existences couldn't be helped. Instead, Tanner's feelings were more on Havoc's behalf than directed towards her. She was certainly obnoxious. He couldn't fault anyone for coming to that conclusion. But he found it sad that no one looked beyond her superficial fronts, that she was so callously disregarded because of that one aspect of her personality. She was brilliant. It had taken him seconds to see it in the way she talked, the way she thought about things. There was something to her, at least in his mind. In everyone else's, though, she was merely crazy Havoc Bentley. It was frustrating. Tanner looked up to realize, with some dismay, that the attention had turned to him. Must be a big head for you to get lost in it so easily, Ackerman was saying. Care to share, Mr. Tanner? Why have you killed yourself? 4 times. Tanner stared back at the older-looking therapist, in all likelihood a man who'd seen fewer years than he, meeting his wan smile with a hard-set look. First of all, we just did this last time, and I already gave you my answer. I'm bored. I'm tired. There's nothing new here, and you just reinforced it quite beautifully. Ackerman seemed taken aback by Tanner's sudden harsh tone, prompting a grin from Havoc. He's silent. Shocker, she sang under her breath, and Tanner had to struggle not to laugh again. So you think this world has little, if anything, to offer you, young man? Tanner rolled his eyes, a very Havoc-like gesture. That's right, he said evenly. But our relationship with everything around us is twofold. You're an intelligent person, Mr. Tanner. Some of the methods in which you have offed yourself, you've taken a great deal of cunning. So I ask you, what do you have to offer the world? Tanner thought for a long moment, ignoring the stares that settled on him, the anticipating faces. He felt he had given his fair share, having worked nearly 4 times the amount that someone might have before the cure for death was found. He had been a researcher, an engineer, a teacher, and even a professional gambler. He had helped bring the public utilities of water and sewer in each city into the modern era, replacing several woefully outdated systems. Most of New York owed the ease of their drink and of their waste disposal to his earlier efforts. He felt his contribution had been more than enough. "I don't have anything left to offer," he said softly, though part of him didn't quite believe it. So that's that chapter. Chapter 18, it's about a third of the way into the book. And reading that chapter gave me an interesting thought, on something I guess I almost accidentally inserted into the novel, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, and I think it's one of those things that if you do enjoy the book and you think about it outside of just reading it, that you would come to the conclusion of, and maybe there's even a little bit of a metaphor in there. I'm sure this makes no sense since you have no idea what I'm talking about and haven't read the book, particularly with the Ackerman character. And there's a chapter later on that I think really reinforces what I had considered. I should just stop talking because you have no idea what I'm saying. There's chapter 18 of the book. It's almost there, I think. A little tough to read because there are quite a few marks on it. Some of the language, and it's tough because speaking and reading are two different things. Reading, you can quickly get through things that help you paint a picture in your head. Reading silently, that is. All the indicators of who's speaking, the he said, she said, blah, 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 blah. You read that silently and you just pass right over it like it's nothing. You expect it to be in a book. You read it out loud and it sounds kind of tedious. So it might not be the best way to kind of showcase this, but that's the way I did. So, trying to think if I have anything else to talk about. I don't know if there's a timeline for when it will be available. Probably for purchase on Kindle and Lulu. I think I'll probably make it between $2 and $3. Seems like a pretty decent price for an electronic book. I have some rewriting to do. One chapter before that I didn't like it. I didn't think it was good enough. And I think, like I said, there's a chapter later on where I can kind of expand on really the purpose of the Ackerman character and really make people think about what he meant to the story. Let me know what you think. If you actually want to read the draft right now, I'm cool with that. It always helps to have more people read it, give impressions on what's unclear and what they take out of it, because honestly, I'm the writer. All this has come out of my head, so I have an intimate knowledge of it, and I don't know, how people see it that haven't, thought of the story themselves. Also, I have trouble gauging the emotional impact, the intellectual impact of a book like this, because I wrote it and because this is probably the 7th or 8th time I've gone through it. After a while, it just gets kind of mind-numbing. So, I can read it and try and pretend that I've never read it before, but that really doesn't work very well. So I'd be interested to see what more people think. Early comments are that it does carry the emotional weight that I hope it does, that it's one of my more well-written stories, that it does give you a lot of things to think about, which is really my ultimate goal, and It's a decent dystopian novel. And I guess I'll shut up now and hopefully upload this to YouTube.